What's up, everybody? We are here with Dr. Mark Smith, and Michael Morgan will be joining us in a little bit. Eric is not going to be joining us on this bonus session with Dr. Mark, but he is here in spirit. So I'd like to just introduce him and let him take it away.
All right. Thank you, Vera. For those of you who don't know, I'm Mark Smith, and I'm here to speak tonight for a couple of things. One, in the last time we had these 5-day challenge, there was a bonus session supposed to be about some things related to cognitive science. And then more recently, when we talked about this session, we thought we'd just combine it because the people who come to this session would also be entitled to that bonus session. And specifically, one of the things that Eric addressed, and you may have seen him talk about this or phrase it in saying what I'm going to be talking about, is unlocking the brain. And I have to tell you, if you haven't watched yet the interview with Dr. Mayo, Dr. Darlene, what an amazing interview. You definitely want to watch that. I have literally been walking back and forth pacing ever since she got off because the information was so valuable. So anyway, back to unlocking your brain. One of the things that the people who have been in my training sessions, I have a long history of training and teaching classes in college, university, from undergraduate up to master's level, and then factory floor settings and in C-level executive offices. Done a lot of training and education. One of the things I'm known for is I like to interrupt the status quo. And I say that because typically I find that people, I know that I am, as a person, I can do this even though I'm actively opposed to it. And that is, I always advise people, don't drink the Kool-Aid. Don't just accept something as given. And so what that leaves you with is asking questions. And earlier today, I made the comment about everyone's a scientist. Scientists may not agree with me when I say the average person is a scientist, but here's what a scientist is, in my opinion. You have an idea or a question, you research it, you find out some data, you look at the data, you draw conclusions, and you take action. Well, I think that's a scientist, and that's what most humans are. That's how we get by the day. So back to the topic of unlocking the brain. When you hear that topic, for example, earlier today in a meeting we had, I began to write a bunch of things on the board. This was in a meeting before being online. And Eric ran down a number of ideas. People having struggles with thoughts about the past, struggle with are they good enough, many things like that. And Dr. Darlene talked about that. And I know that there's many people who participate in or lead different types of inner healing, and I think that's great. And if that works for you, that's great. But there are also other people who go through that and maybe they don't get their inner healing. Or there are people that just still struggle no matter what. They still struggle with some of those thoughts and those processes. So I want to take some time here to talk about that. And I'm going to take quite a different approach to that. And so hopefully this will share some new pathways for you to consider and how you might address unlocking your brain. So when you unlock your brain, you imply that your brain is locked, right? Every time you hear something, when you take that information in, you should have this inquiry going on in your mind about what does it mean, what's being implied, what's being stated. So unlocking your brain sort of implies that your brain's locked. Hey, Michael, how you doing? So that leads me to ask questions. Well, how does the mind work? What's the brain? What does that mean? How does it work? You heard some pretty remarkable things being said earlier by Dr. Darlene, and I'm sure many of us here have experienced those unusual circumstances around the mind and things that the mind does. And so that just leads me naturally to trying to figure out exactly what is the mind, what is the brain, what's it doing. And it takes me back to a time many years ago. We used to call that conversation in your head. Years ago, back in the 70s and 80s, that would be 1970, 1980, that used to be referred to as the stream of consciousness, right? And there's this constantly flowing stream of thought in your mind, right? Like, some people might be going right now, who is this old guy? Why does he keep talking? I don't understand what's going on. What does he mean, stream of consciousness? Like, cut, 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 right? That's always going on in your mind. Well, in a way, if that's leading you, then kind of your brain's locked. If you're not leading it, it's leading you. Almost by definition, you're chained to something, right? You're being taken somewhere. And so to me, that was worth investigating. And so that led me into the area of what I call cognitive science. I know some people who describe cognitive science say it separates all the sciences. It's kind of a grouping of different kinds of sciences, and it separates it from the spiritual, to which I say hogwash. There's no such thing as separating a human being from the spiritual side of a human being, because it's a whole package. So if I'm gonna investigate that, I want to start at the most fundamental level I can. So what's the most fundamental thing about a human being? What's the one thing, if there is such a thing, to which all human beings are subject? The answer is there's only one metric that all human beings are measured by that's the same around the world: time. Time's the only one and only universal metric. So let's talk about time. So we say that time is, to give you some examples, 24 hours in a day. There's 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day, 365 days in a year, except when there's like some extra, and then it's 366. And we use this as a fundamental tool upon which we measure everything. You can become a millionaire. You may have to live to be 150, but you could become a millionaire. That's a time metric, right? You could become a neurosurgeon. What's the difference between me and Dr. Mayo? About 50 years. That's about how long it would take me to try and become a neurosurgeon, right? So time is this universal element that separates people from accomplishment. So if time is that key, if time is that important, seems like it probably be important that we understand it correctly, right? Except we have no idea what time is. And here's how I know I know that we have it wrong. So I just said that time is 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes an hour, 24 hours in a day, 365 days in a year, except for when it's 366. So when they first came up with that, which, let's see, that's the Gregorian calendar, so that goes back to Pope Gregory, so it's a way long time ago. Since then, back then they had whatever timepieces they have. Today, we have timepieces that are just stunningly accurate. So if we know that, and I think they know exactly how much in seconds, which is their metric, they know exactly how much we're off. Why don't they just fix it? Why not just reset it so it's 365? Because they made that up. Well, that kind of led me into an interesting area of research. I tried to figure out what time really is. Well, time's really a pattern, right? If you think about it, time is most fundamentally, it's measured in days, right? It's sunrise, daylight, sundown, darkness. Sunrise, daylight, sundown, darkness. Okay. Well, that's a pattern. Okay. So it's a cycle. Well, when you have a cycle, it implies repetition, right? You're going back around the cycle and back around the cycle, back around the cycle. So something about time has to do with the concept of patterns and movement of things that recur.
Dr. Mark, if I could real quick drop an Albert Einstein quote. Einstein said, "The only reason for time is so that everything does not happen at once." So it's a way of demarking just what is reality, what reality is. And I just wanted to share that real quick, but love what you're saying. I also wanted to acknowledge Bethany said, teach us to number our days that we would have a heart of wisdom and discernment. It's great to see the type of comments that are going on in the chat, but also I think the things you're stirring up in people, you're gonna bring a lot of bubbling in people's hearts and their minds. So thank you for that. Just wanted to comment real quick.
Thank you, Michael. That was really good. Yeah. So Einstein, I'm glad you mentioned him. Einstein, he was a big, he didn't drink Kool-Aid. He liked to have thought experiments, right? There are some people who speculate that he actually was an average student, but because he journaled, he became a genius. At any rate, he would say, well, if this happened, what would it look like? For example, he compared gravity to an elevator traveling through space at the speed of light, and somebody shoots a bullet at it, comes in the front, but because the speed of the elevator is so fast, faster than the bullet appears to go out lower at the back of the elevator, and therefore that's gravity. Well, it all depends on where you're standing. In the elevator, it looks like gravity. At any rate, the idea is if we stop and use our brain, we can begin to figure these things out. And so when you understand that something as important as time is not what we think it is, and you start to investigate patterns, you begin to discover things. For me, it's in scripture, and I'm not pushing that on anybody. I'm just saying there's lots of ancient writings. This is the group of ancient writings I use. But there's just some very interesting things about that. And as a scientist, as someone who comes from the scientific community, I discovered that much of what's written in scripture exactly is the same or tends to be supported by real science like quantum physics. And so let me just try and make that connection if I can. And I want to come back to some of the comments that people are asking. And let me just say one more thing for those of us who do read scripture. I don't believe God puts things in the Bible by accident. I don't think he sat back one day and say, well, let's put this word in. I think we'll put that phrase in. I think everything there is there deliberately. And when I recently, and I'm on a non-stop journey about this time thing, it's the thing I can't get away from. I started it in 1996. Something as important as time, you'd think you'd find it in the Bible, right? So I've been talking about this concept of having time wrong for some time, for a while. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go back to the Bible. I'm going to look up the word hour, because hour is a fundamental concept. We ought to be able to find that in the Bible. And I just want to see what especially the Hebrew mindset was about it. And I went back in the old what we call the Old Testament. I don't really separate them, but in the Hebrew scriptures. And there's only like 6 times the word hour is ever used. And all 6 times is when the story of the fiery furnace is being told. And that word hour really means glance. So something as important as hour to us doesn't even appear in that Jewish mindset of the time the Bible was written. Gee, I wonder who got that right. Anyway, so back to quantum physics. So quantum physics, just so I'm going to take like a 50,000 foot view here, because I don't really study it at the intimate level of calculus and that, because I'm not really sure calculus is real. But at any rate, I just don't get down that level. But I think you can understand it at a very high level if you want. So at a very high level, it's the most tested, as my understanding, the most tested theory in all of science is quantum theory. And one of the things quantum theory says is that the observer changes the observed. Now you have to let that sink in for a minute. The observer changes the thing observed, which means by my looking at something, I changed it. And first time I heard that, I thought, well, that's kind of nuts. That can't be right. And yet they've proven it over and over again. Now, I personally would add to that the person who observes something with intent changes what they observe. Because there's something that happens inside of the human being that it's mixed with that observation that causes the thing observed to change. Well, that led me to start trying to understand, what do all these things mean? So still at the 50,000 foot view, that one's hard to sink in, but they know it's true. It sounds a little bit like some of the things we've heard in scripture, but let's just check a little bit further. So if the observer changes the observed, what's the foundation for that? Where did that come from? Well, there's a thing in science called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. It refers to this, and this is, again, big picture view. I know some of the sciences describes it differently today, but big picture view. Protons, neutrons, electrons make up an atom, is what we used to be told. Now we know there's lots of subparticles and subparticles and subparticles. And some scientists say when you get down far enough, what you realize is that subparticle is really made up of nothing. At any rate, so let's just take protons, neutrons, and electrons. Protons and neutrons in the center, electrons flying around the outside. So back in the day when this theory came out, there were 4 different circles or orbits that could go around the center of this nucleus, right? So an electron could be at this lower orbit, or the next highest one, or the next highest one, or the outer one. They were called shells, but they were orbits, right? And the more energy that was embedded in that atom, then that electron could move out. When it released energy, that electron moved in. And when you hear people talk about quantum leaps, they mean leaping from one to the next. And, you know, we'll talk about quantum leaps in the Q&A later, okay? At any rate.
Dr. Mark, can I make a quick thought there, just to connect it to the metaverse? In virtual reality, they do not designate things through time, interestingly enough, at least through our units of time. In the metaverse, people who work in virtual reality development, they actually call it instances. So instead of referring to minutes, moments, worlds, or dimensions, they call them instances. And the reason this is in a virtual reality world, there are actually technically infinite instances that you can exist in. And so if you and the person in the virtual reality world are in separate instances, but in the same world, you'll never encounter each other. So the job of virtual video game platforms and developers and game companies is to actually ensure that everyone in the game is living and experiencing the same instance. That's the job of the game platform. That's the job. It's the vessel of the game platform, is to make sure that everybody's in the right instance. Because if they're not, you're going to be all by yourself, and that's not going to be fun for anybody. I accidentally came into a virtual reality dance club that my friend invited me to, and somehow I got put into the wrong instance. So I was searching for him, and I went into the DJ place, and it was this giant cavernous darkness. And I was like, dude, where's the party? He's like, what do you mean, where's the party? I'm having the greatest party of my life. I was like, dude, I'm going to show you a picture of my screen right now. I'm the only person in here. And then he's like, whoa, man, you're in another instance. And I just wanted to use that example because I feel like sometimes we can actually place ourselves in different instances where we could be in the same room with our friends and family. We could be at a dance club, but if our head, our mind, our mental space is in a kind of a different instance, we won't even enjoy being there with all these other people. We might as well be by ourselves. And I think that's what the term being stuck in your head means. But this whole idea of quantum physics or virtual reality, the metaverse, it's actually bringing these psychological, neuroscientific terms into practical application. And so I just wanted to chime in, Dr. Mark, because what you're referring to is now no longer theoretical science. Because of the worlds of virtual reality, they are now becoming applied science. Because once you learn that you have to function within a certain instance and get other people in that, your business, so to speak, actually depends on making sure that those instances are connected. So anyway, just wanted to chime in there. But last thing I'll say is there's just some great comments in here as well. Thanks everybody. Team Lions Roar is really making a pronounced engagement. So go Team Lions Roar.
That's very interesting what you're saying, Arlie. That's because you know that as we'll discover, the more we talk about it, the mind, it comes down to a question: what is the brain really? And that's where I was headed. And what you're saying really reinforces some of the exciting times ahead of us as we develop the that space. Because remember earlier I said time is a cycle. So if God is eternal, what does that mean? No cycle, right? Opens up a whole another idea, which there wouldn't be, because if a cycle is light and dark, we know that time stops in Revelation. It says it ends. Well, why does it end? Because it's daylight all the time. No more cycle. Anyway, so what is the mind really? Well, I'm going to suggest an idea. Based on the uncertainty principle, Schrodinger, came up with an equation. And in his equation, he calculated, where could I find the electron? It's got to be somewhere. Where would I find the electron? So he came up with an equation, and it would predict the probability of where those electrons might be found. Well, the interesting part was it worked perfectly for electrons if you were looking in the past. But if you were looking in the future, there would be like multiple places that would look, the equation would make the electron jump around. And it was referred to at the time, I think it was Schrodinger referred to it as those damn jumps. Because if he'd have known that when he wrote the equation, that's what it would predict, they wanted to predict an absolute. And yet what they found out was humans can't. And so it was a very interesting thing. But what does that mean for the mind? Well, let's think of it. Everything starts as energy and eventually becomes matter. Well, how does that happen? Well, there's this 4-part equation, right? I'll put my hand in front here. four-part equation. These are four possibilities where the electron might be. So now it's energy. The observer observes one, immediately the other three collapse. And now I have a point of matter. I just created that matter by observing it. Well, what does that mean then? Well, that's called energy wave collapse. That's why you'll hear me refer to, hey, I'm hearing the collapse. How did this get here? Well, somebody spoke it. Somebody thought it. Because when you speak and when you think, that's energy. Every time you speak, you're creating what? Energy waves. Those energy waves are really possibility. Somebody's going to observe that because it's going to float around until somebody does. And it'll become matter. That'll become this reality. How did we get here? Somebody spoke this. Somebody thought it. Okay. Well, how does that deal with unlocking your brain? Well, if you know your brain has something to do with this, is it possible that the brain is really just a quantum processor?
Dr. Mark, may I be a leading not objector, but a leading advocate for you with a quick story and question?
Sure.
Because I really legitimately would like to see your answer to this. So it was posed to me by a friend who's a bit of a philosopher that if you go into a sensory deprivation chamber and you go inside and one by one they remove your senses, right? So your hearing, your eyesight, etc., until it becomes nothing. You're fully immersed in the sensory deprivation chamber. What is the first thing that a person begins to imagine or envision once their senses have been completely removed from them? This is what was posed to me, but then I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, Dr. Mark. Let's say you go fully immersed, and the first thing that you experience is an image of your friend who you know well coming up to you and saying, hello, how are you doing? And you say, I'm good. He says, great. Hey, where are you right now? Where are we? Well, where are we? And then all of a sudden you look around and he says, are we at a beach right now? And then all of a sudden you realize that you're standing on sand and you have waves that are lapping up your feet. And he says, hey, were you going to go visit your girlfriend later? Because she's asking about you. And you have a girlfriend and her name is Samantha, right? And you say, oh, yeah. Well, hey, you want to come with me? And then we're going to go out to dinner right now. We're going to go get veggie grill. Next thing you know, I know, you're suddenly sitting in a veggie grill with your best friend who you know, right? I'm your best friend. Of course I'm your best friend. And your girlfriend. So here's the question, Dr. Mark. Has your reality been completely influenced by this individual who approached you as your best friend? Or is he legitimately just reminding you of your reality? Or did you not have this reality at all before he approached you? And through the power of suggestion, he's been able to make you think all of these other things. I would legitimately like to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Well, my first thought is I probably created that friend who walked up to me, right?
Possibly, yes. Tell me more.
Well, if everything's gone, then there's no way he can walk up to me. So I brought him up to me to make the suggestions, which is really a whole interesting idea all by itself.
So you used this other figure as a vehicle for your own memory.
Well, that's a great question too. So here's I'm glad in a way I'm kind of glad Dr. Darlene's not here because I'm about to make an explanation that you would probably get sick over. But short version, inbound nerves are afferent. Cognitive nerves, mostly in the brain, they process things. Efferent nerves are going out to the muscles. So you have inbound processing and outbound. At the end of a nerve that's transmitting is the axon. At the receptor is called a dendrite. They kind of fit together, sort of. They don't touch, but they kind of fit together. When an impulse comes in, it fires, quote unquote fires. That's called a synapse. And there's either electrochemical discharge or electricity. Electrical discharges are things like the eyes, as I understand it, are instantaneous. Electrochemical is still fast, but instantaneous almost is like the eyes. Anyway, so at the end of the dendrite is the bumps form. If that fires often enough. So what are those bumps? Well, if you've seen the movie In and Out, the little balls, right? These bumps are called boutons. Some think that these are physical representations of memory. Possibly. I think more likely that if I've got 100 billion neurons in my head, and they each have 7,000 connections, then there's certainly an opportunity for many patterns to emerge in that. So there could be like maybe 100,000 firings at once, right? That's a pattern. When that pattern repeats, I have that same experience, but it's based on those physical representations at the end of the axons, right? So what you're experiencing in that particular scenario could be firings. It could be that because those nerves want to live, right? Your body wants to live, so it will do things to live. So I'm going to suspect, because it's hypothetical, that they would fire because they're searching for, in order for those bumps to stay bumps, they have to fire. Okay, and so yeah, that's a little more technical probably.
No, that's very helpful. So then is it possible, based on what you just shared, that some of us, or all of us, that we're actually in sensory deprivation chambers of some sort?
Could be. Well,
like this is a simulation, basically.
Right. So we could be thoughts in somebody's head. Yeah. The one of the concepts that comes then from the idea that the observer changes the observed, like the idea, for example, one of the phrases I used to be famous for, and I have lots of quality certifications. Anyway, I used to say, second biggest or third biggest lie is continuous improvement, because there's no such thing. And because there's no such thing as continuous, there's only discrete. And so literally, when you step forward, you are stepping into the future. And if you change, your observation changes the world, then the scientist would tell you, you literally create the earth underneath your foot when you take a step. If that's true, then we are potentially creating that moment, like all the instances really exist at the same time. You just have to be connected to the right ones to see your friends, but they're all there, right? Like you were talking about earlier, they'd all be there, right. But if you're not connected to the right one, you just don't see your friends. And so all these instances actually probably exist, but it's only what you're, you're trained to only see certain patterns. And so your mind, because it can't take in the data, it's got this huge filter filtering things out. Because if your mind tried to take in and process all the data that's coming into you right now from where you're sitting, that room, your mind would just fry. Well, so it just says, okay, I'm only going to accept this reality. Well, a good example is, have you ever lost something in your house and you can't find it, and you tear the place up, you look around everywhere, and you come out, and for me, it could be a book. I'm used, in my mind, I see a picture of the book I'm looking for and I can't find it. So I'm looking for this book, right? Like that. Whoop. I'm looking for that book. I can't find that book anywhere. But I go into the kitchen and it's sitting on the table upright. That didn't occur for me. I never saw it because I was looking for that. And so literally, because the observer changes the observed, those instances could be around you right now. But you're not willing to, your mind is filtering them out because it can't deal with them right now. And so if time is not what we think it is, it begs the question, what is it really? And we'll have to do that another time.
Well, to wrap this all together, first of all, thank you, Dr. Mark. This was amazing. I'm wrapping it like a present because this is really also a present in the present, which will soon be the future, which will soon be the past, which is, as I speak right now, already the future. I love this conversation. Thank you. I feel a little like I could be Marty McFly and you could be Doc Brown.
I need more hair.
No, you're great. You're fine just the way you are. We could hop into a DeLorean and we can just, scoot off to Nova Scotia if you like. But I don't know why Nova Scotia just strikes me as a place where you want to go in a DeLorean. But I think what you've whetted here in the appetites of these wonderful people as a part of this challenge is that we are not aimlessly going into the metaverse. We are not going into the metaverse just naively or even ignorantly, but we have questions in our hearts that we have not got answers to. And we've read books, and we've taken classes, and we've watched videos, and we've tried to strain these ideas, and yet we've come up with sand in our hands. And the opportunity for philosophers and for alchemists and for scientists in the present age that we're living is to actually practically experiment in ways that have never allowed for experimentation before, through virtual reality, augmented reality, through cryptocurrency, through Internet of Things, through blockchain. That we're basically playing in a sandbox, Dr. Mark. And so the thing I love about Dr. Mark, I want to just honor him for a second. I've had the great privilege of knowing him for a solid 33 days now, my friend. I've chalked them all on my calendar because truly he's such a dear person. I've been on calls with him professionally with other people we've been working with. But the thing I love about Dr. Mark is he is so childlike in a good way, in a mature way. And yet he's curious and he's interested and he's smart and he's playful. And I think that these are the things that childlikeness that are going to open up space for exploration and innovation and invention that have always done that. But those who go into the metaverse with this type of attitude, with a Dr. Mark type of attitude, with eyes wide open and a thirst and a hunger for new discoveries, I'll put it this way. If you're in this challenge, I truly believe you have some wonderful role models for how to search, how to seek, how to find. But more importantly, the journey is your journey. I'm speaking to everybody here. I'm in a different instance, perhaps. Dr. Mark is in a different instance. But the beauty and the joy of being a part of Web 2 is that through a platform like Facebook, all of our instances started to cross and connect. And when I type something that I'm thinking, suddenly Dr. Mark can read that comment and he can reply and he can post, now only as fast as he types, but we're reaching a time very soon when it will not be how fast we type, it will be how fast we think.
Yep.
And it'll be what we think and how fast we think and where we think that maybe suddenly will appear somewhere, very much like the sensory deprivation chamber. And I'll see my friend Dr. Mark, and he'll come up to me and say, Michael, what are you doing here? I'll say, well, I put on this headset thing, and now what are you doing here? I'm about to go out to dinner. Would you like to join me? Veggie grill. And all of a sudden, I'm not in a sensory deprivation chamber, but I have a VR headset on. And it's giving me similar experiences to these experiments that have been run and talked about for many years. So all that to say, we're going to move into a Zoom, a special VIP Zoom with 30 minutes of Q&A in there. We hope that you can join us in that new venue. But I'm very grateful to Dr. Mark. I know I speak for everybody when we say thank you for gracing over your wisdom. I'm already going to put it out there, Dr. Mark. When can we have session 2? When can we have session 2.0? We'll leave that with you.
Yeah. So a couple things real quick. One is, Mike, I really appreciate your comments because I know, but I don't know if people here know just what a genius you are. So for you to make those comments about me, I'm pretty excited. Actually, I'm thinking everybody keeps asking me this stuff. So I think I'm probably going to, like, maybe in May, maybe I'll do a challenge or something. And I'm currently writing a book about all this. So maybe I should do something like that. But as we move into this next phase, before we go, in case for those of you who aren't going to be joining us, you might want to reconsider that. Because one of the things that, now that you've heard all that we've said here, you have to ask yourself, gee, I wonder if there's patterns in scripture I'm missing. And if so, what do they tell me? Or what could they tell me if I wasn't missing them? That's all I have until we answer some questions in Q&A.
Wow, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mark. We're so grateful for you. I believe we're going to bon voyage to you all. Before we do, though, I just want to acknowledge some great comments. Fidelis Oketch says, I'm humbled to be here. We've got Bethany Spilled giving some applause emojis. We got fire emojis from Cassandra Corleone. We've got thank you, a heart, and love from Gina Overton. Thank you, so good from Crystal Travis, Lorena Harris. Traders BC says thank you for your wisdom. So Dr. Mark, I just wanted to read that real time to you because these are people's comments. They're very grateful for what you've brought. And hopefully we will see some of them soon. So much love to you all. Dr. Mark, I'll give you the last word, brother. Take us out.
I just want to speak a blessing over people. Those of you who are not believers, you can have it anyway. Father, just ask that you bless these people, that you would let them understand what it is they're stepping into when they step into the metaverse and what they can enjoy from this new technology and what they can enjoy from the NFT world and how that can change their life in a positive way. Amen. Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen. See you guys in Zoom.
Peace out.